Hello, everyone online. This is Charles Mauro. We'll be starting in about 3 to 4 minutes. Thanks for joining. Hello, everyone. This is Charles Mauro. We're going to be beginning in another minute. We'll just let a few more folks join in. Okay, everyone, I think we'll get started today. I wanted to welcome everyone this afternoon. This is our second in a series of seminars on low-cost, high-value human factors optimization methods in the age of COVID-19. Today, we're going to be focusing specifically on professional heuristics and cognitive task analysis. I'd like to say good morning to all of our colleagues on the West Coast and in the West. Good afternoon to everybody here in the East. We're in New York and we have colleagues spread across the East. And finally, good evening to all of our friends and colleagues in Europe and Scandinavia who are joining us this afternoon. It's evening time there after dinner. Thank you very much for joining. I'd like to begin, first of all, with a very quick overview of who we are, what our firm is about. We have basically a very simple one-page summary. The firm was founded in 1975. We are located in New York, and we deliver human factors research to many global teams. We have many years of experience, over 4,000 projects, and our primary focus is human factors optimization. Our primary area of focus with specific product product categories is medical devices. We've won many research awards, Human Factors and Ergonomics Society, Association for Computing Machinery, NASA, etc. Our clients, including, in addition to many leading medical entities, Google, Nike, Dyson, Goldman Sachs, DoD, many non-medical clients as well. We are certified human factors professionals. We also have extensive experience in intellectual property, issues related to design and graphical user interface design. We've been experts in over 75 major design IP cases. We're widely published. We speak frequently at MIT, Stanford, UPenn, the FDA, etc. And probably some of you on the call, on the webinar, know us from our presentations at Human Factors and Ergonomics. If you want more information, please look us up, Mauro Usability Science. And we do have extensive experience with traditional informative user testing for medical devices. However, we're best known for our advanced human factors research methods. I'll just run down the list of expertise that we have and that we combine in various forms. High performance eye tracking, GSR, microfacial, Newtonian force. We're a leading provider of force measurement studies for medical devices, EMGs, 3D spatial tracking. We have proprietary spatial tracking technology, EEG, cognitive modeling, and ACT, which we're going to talk about today, cognitive workload, learning decay, neuroaesthetics, heuristics, which is our other topic for today. We have extensive experience in complex remote user testing and large sample online surveys. We're a primary vendor for Qualtrics. So very briefly, that's who we are and what we're known for. Today's presenters, as I said briefly, I'm Charles Mauro. I'm president and founder of Mauro Usability Science. I have a graduate degree in human factors engineering and over 40 years experience in complex human factors research. Chris Morley is our director of research, and he will be covering the applied CTA work today. And Chris is our primary lead on usability testing and human factors optimization for medical products. So the objectives for today, what we want to leave you with, which is obviously very important. What are these methods? Examples of how they're applied. Costs relative to other user testing. That's very important in light of COVID. If you have questions, feel free to type them in the chat box in the lower right corner of your screen. We welcome any follow-up emails that you may have. We'll finish right at 35 minutes. We may stay online for live questions. You're welcome to do so. But out of respect for everyone else's time, we will finish right on time. Our next webinar is June 25th. It will be a session in collaboration with iMotions, which we look forward to. So now moving directly to the topic of interest, infrequently utilized high-cost, low-cost, high-value methods. There's a number of these methods that are widely utilized in other industries. Heuristics, applied CTA, targeted sampling, which is a methodology for providing very robust data with using a small subject sample, agile style, instructions for use optimization, HFE white paper generation, literature review and technical memo creation. These are all methodologies that are low cost, high value that are, as I said, are used in other industries. An important point is that many of these methodologies are not widely known or widely utilized in medical product optimization. And today we're going to talk about heuristics and applied CTA. So what is professional heuristics? It's basically a very rapid human factors evaluation of a medical product or any product for that matter, based on a validated rule-based rating system that's very structured. It's not just an offhanded review of the product at hand. And these types of reviews are executed by trained human factors subject matter experts. I think a good way to think about this conceptually is this is a methodology that is akin to the physician-patient diagnosis model. A physician comes to a patient with considerable education background, and they apply that expertise to analyzing and diagnosing the current clinical situation of the patient. And heuristics is very much like that, but with a focus on the product itself. There's no user testing, therefore there's no user risk. It replaces the user in user studies with structured analysis and subject matter experts. So you can think of the SME as taking the place of the user in these types of studies. Importantly, heuristics can be used at any stage of development, from paper prototype all the way up to post-production or late-stage production product. It does not replace formative studies, but it dramatically reduces the cost of such studies. It's probably the most rigorous human factors analysis that can be executed. For our clients who we run complex heuristic studies for, they routinely comment that it's the most detailed analysis that they receive, far beyond anything that surfaces in normal formative or summative studies. Very briefly, heuristics has been around for a very long time. There's nothing particularly new about it. These are some of the other areas where heuristics is broadly applied. We've done heuristics studies in all of these categories. However, as I mentioned before, truly professional heuristics is infrequently used in medical devices. So heuristics basically breaks down into two phases. There's a audit and ratings phase where the rule structure is used to evaluate the product or system, and then there's a phase two, which involves redesign of the product or system to reduce rule violations and severity, and this is done by design. These redesign phases are always determined in terms of level of impact, the relative level of allowed change, minimal change, moderate, or major change. And this is part of the methodology that makes heuristics relatively rapid to execute and high value. The design is then iterated for future rule removal and severity reduction. So you have an initial analysis, benchmarks the current status of the product, and then iterations, and then reevaluation. The reevaluations can be done very quickly, usually in an hour or so, once the primary analysis has been completed. So very briefly, the way the methodology is actually structured technically is there are basically 20 rules. These are category rules. I'm not going to go into all of these, obviously, but for example, the device information clarity rule, the non-modal rule. These are all structured rules that are based on human factors science. So, for example, under the device information clarity rule, there are detailed statements against which the product is evaluated. For example, here the device should always provide the user with information that does not require secondary processing for the user to understand the status of the device at any time. And for any of you who might be involved in more robust on-body injectors, more advanced auto-injector type of technology, you know that this type of issue is very important. And as I said, there are 20 rules. I'm not going to go through all of those today, but the process is stepwise, and each rule is applied by the subject matter experts. Generally speaking, there are two SMEs on each analysis. The product is evaluated independently, and then conflicts are resolved between the two SMEs. How the rules are developed. Each rule is based on underlying human factors research literature. They're not just opinion of the SMEs, and they are based on the experience of the subject matter experts. Very important, heuristics in general is only as effective as the experience of the SMEs undertaking the analysis. So if you're considering heuristics, it's very important to properly validate who's doing the work. And another very important point, the rules are updated constantly based on actual user testing programs. In our case, we do a considerable amount of actual user testing, and when we encounter certain new problems and related solutions, we update our database. And of course, we have a constant review of peer-reviewed literature. So the rules are structured and updated. If there's a rule violation, then there's also a severity rating with respect to the violation. Here we have severity mappings. Some of you probably recognize, for example, a high severity. That would be a severity rating that predicts critical step failure. You probably recognize that from FDA data. So depending on the type of project, the rules can be either mapped to FDA, a summative validation, or it can be mapped to FMEA, failure modes and effects analysis. So there's different types of violation severity ratings depending on the type of project. So for example, you would end up with a chart that looks something like this. There was a heuristic rule violation, there's a problem description and a severity rating. And this is true for, you go through all of the rules. How are rules and violations actually determined, or more appropriately, the violations? They're determined by understanding the detailed definition of your user population at the lowest percentile. This is a question related to how respondents are recruited and how we conceptualize their capabilities as we conduct heuristics. As some of you or many of you may already understand, human attributes, whether it's anthropometry or biomechanics or cognitive capabilities, are generally speaking normally distributed in a given population. Current human factors best practice dictates that the range of functional capabilities that the device has to be designed for should range between the 97.5 and the 2.5 percentiles. And of course, when you're actually looking at a medical device, what you're really concerned about is not the entire distribution so much, but the lower percentile distribution of the 2.5 to the 5 percentile. And it's that percentile that we use as the design criteria against which we conduct the heuristics. So underlying the rules and severity is a definition of your user profile, and that profile is based here on this lower functional requirement. So how are limitations of your user profiles determined? Basically, we have a large database which we query for specific user profiles. For an example, if you were looking at on-body auto injector, audio signal detection type of problem, the sort of audio signals that these devices produce, we would pull from our database older patient experiences that tells us that it's well understood that age-related hearing loss focuses on specific high-frequency ranges, and this results in an inability to detect certain audio status indications of these devices. So this is an example of how we pull from the database based on the functional requirements of your users. And of course, in this specific example, that data would be used to inform the audio signal design for the OBI devices during development, instead of waiting until you've run a formative or even a summative study and you discover that your patient population can't detect the audio signals of the device. We have written an important paper on this, which is up on SSRN. This is a whole paper related to a percentile user device design criteria and FDA guidance. Feel free to request a copy, or you can pull this down directly from SSRN. So the types of applications where heuristics has been used relatively extensively, as you would expect, various forms of handheld devices, OBIs, IFUs, packages. Sometimes heuristics is utilized only on a very narrow portion of a specific medical device design problem, for example, dose delivery. And of course, medical apps, software as a medical device, a very active area for heuristics. So very quickly, I'd like to finish with a case study. This is an on-body injector. For those of you who are not familiar with these types of devices, this is a injector that is affixed to the patient. They wear it on their body for approximately 20 hours, and the medication is dispensed either during or at the end of the 20-hour period. And these devices have various audio and visual signals that tell the patient or the HCP what the status of the device is. In this particular project, we've tested many different OBIs for various clients. Generally speaking, these products came to us in rough working prototype form with early stage instructions. Most of these are executed in about 15 days with 2 SMEs. In some of these cases, we also conducted formative, summative, and in-market research on the same product. So we have a very good understanding of where heuristics fits and how effective it can be compared to other forms of testing. So in this particular case, these are the category rules, which I've already described. I'm not going to go back through that again. For example, let's just look at how this was applied. This is the information clarity rule for this specific on-body injector. This is the question of whether or not the information requires secondary processing or secondary learning on the part of the users. We have other rules. What's important, I think, to reiterate here is that if you utilize the 20 heuristic rules, they constitute an extremely robust human factors engineering criteria for any device. And these rules and the rigor of these rules is rarely applied to medical device development. So in this particular case, we had this clarity, information clarity rule. There was a violation, detailed description, and severity. And underlying each rule violation is a detailed analysis. This is a detailed description of what the underlying problem is from a human factors science point of view: signal complexity, cognitive workload, learning decay, training, obviously, and audio signal detection. So when these types of studies are run, what the actual development team ends up with is a very robust cataloging of not only the rule violations, but the underlying human factors science that could be applied to solving these problems. So this is what data actually looks like. You probably recognize this as either a spider chart or a radar chart. Around the perimeter are the 20 rules, and the rating in red is for the HCP user interface for this OBI device, and the blue is the patient interface for this particular device. And what you can see very quickly is that not only were all of these rules violated, but they were also violated at very high severity. And a good way to think about this is a visualization of the overall human factors performance of the product over these various rules. So in the phase 2, the collaborative effort, once the rules are established, then as I mentioned, there's this iteration phase, minimal, moderate, and major impact. And usually these follow the sign of the flow of an iteration. The first iteration is just to lower critical severity by redesign. Redesign is done by the client team, either in concert with our team or independently, and we redo the evaluations. Then we would lower severity further, maybe partial rule removal, and then finally a third iteration, which would go even deeper into rule removal and severity removal. So this is actual data. The black line on the outside is the original design. The blue is the first iteration, green the second, and the red design is the fourth iteration, which shows specifically the level of human factors performance that can be achieved through combining heuristics, robust heuristics, I should say, and redesign. What I want to point out here, for example, you can never, sometimes with very new devices, this area I'm circling with my cursor here, can never be eliminated. For example, in these OBI devices, there were no prior devices like this, so it's impossible to remove that rule violation, but it is certainly possible to dramatically improve or reduce severity. Okay, so comparing heuristics to formative and summative and in markets, in all of these studies where we applied heuristics to this particular product category, the OBIs, we identified 100% of the high severity problems that led to essential step errors during summative studies, but the heuristics is roughly 10% the cost of one summative. These problems could have been easily resolved during summative, and what we've discovered that I think is very important is that formative studies often reveal human factors issues that could easily be resolved using heuristics. So we view this in light of COVID, having the opportunity to push heuristics and more human factors development back into product development. Okay, I'd like to now turn over the session to Chris, and he's going to finish up with CTA.
Okay. I'm just going to give myself presenter permission here. Okay. Okay, so applied cognitive task analysis is another high-value, low-cost, low-risk methodology. It's a quick turnaround methodology. It captures cognitive demands related to task performance via subject matter expert interviews, and it's best done very early in the design process to inform design optimizations prior to formative testing. Interviews can be conducted either remotely using online video conferencing technology, or they can be conducted in the lab, and I'll discuss the pros and cons on a subsequent slide. ACTA is used to optimize the device interface, the instructions for use and/or training. We use it often for optimizing complex dosing and device utilization procedures, as well as IFU optimization. We often use it for that. Importantly, it is not design thinking or contextual inquiry. It's a little more robust and in-depth than that. It's conducted only by validated human factors experts at our firm. And these experts have in-depth training on understanding the cognitive demands of tasks. So I'll walk you through here how an ACTA works. We collect data via 3 in-depth interview methods, each of which is designed to get at different aspects of cognitive skill. So we have the task diagram interview, the knowledge audit, and the simulation interview. The task diagram interview involves the subject matter expert breaking down tasks into subtasks and indicating which subtasks require cognitive skills. So what we're doing here is we're taking an inventory of all the subtasks and then gathering an understanding of the cognitive skills required for each of those subtasks. Then we have the knowledge audit, which is a probing into the expertise required for each task. So we're interested in expertise related to possibly cues and strategies used to complete tasks, how SMEs diagnose and predict different system statuses or states, how they work situation awareness into their task performance strategies, as well as any perceptual skills they've developed over the course of their experience with a task. And the output of this is an inventory of task-specific expertise. And the final interview method is the simulation interview. So with the simulation interview, we actually have the SME walk through a simulated task performance. And while they're doing that, we ask questions and probe into different assessment strategies, actions, critical cues, and any potential errors that they've seen in their experience as they complete this task. So what we're getting here is an understanding of the cognitive demands as the SME completes the task in context. So we collect all the data from these interview methods and we consolidate and synthesize them to determine the cognitive demands for the task as well as the relevant subtasks. And once we understand the cognitive demands from the CTA, we take all of this information and determine how to properly allocate these cognitive demands across the system components to optimize task performance. So we determine how to make redesign or how to redesign the device, the instructions for use, the package design, and any companion apps or software potentially to better manage the cognitive demands required of this task. We have 2 levels of ACTA. We have the basic and advanced. So the basic is basically what I just showed you on the prior slide there. Data is collected via the 3 interview methods, and we typically run our ACTAs remotely online. So this is really good for the age of COVID. It minimizes respondent risk. We typically do this with 8 to 12 subject matter experts. And again, we're collecting that interview data, synthesizing it to gather information on the cognitive demands. Now, the thing about the basic ACTA is it relies primarily on subject matter expert self-report, as well as the expertise of the Mauro Usability Science staff who are executing the ACTA. The difference between the ACTA and the advanced, or the basic and advanced options, is that the advanced ACTA goes beyond subject matter expert self-report by utilizing advanced HFE data streams to provide more sophisticated, in-depth analysis of the cognitive demands related to a task. So with our advanced ACTA, we often use the iMotions data integration platform to collect data that acts to supplement the information we're gathering from subject matter experts in those 3 interview strategies. So depending on the exact task, we'll potentially gather eye tracking data, microfacial expression analysis data. We can gather galvanic skin response, as well as EEG and cognitive workload. And actually, the next webinar that we are going to give is going to be a detailed dive into how we integrate these data streams simultaneously, and we can collect them all at once for an application such as this. One point I just want to make is that we can collect microfacial expression analysis data with the basic ACTA. We do that just through our video capture from the online interviews. Okay, so the typical deliverable for the applied cognitive task analysis is a cognitive demands table. And this is just a robust summary of the interview methods, as well as anything we learned from our supplementary data streams if we're doing the enhanced option, or the enhanced option. So we have the cognitive elements involved in each task or subtask, any difficulties that often arise, common errors, as well as cues and strategies used for task completion. Ultimately, we're looking to provide guidance to the client to improve the interface, instructions for use, training, or whatever the product may involve. And we're really looking to reduce the cognitive and physical workload required for task performance with this particular product, and how to appropriately allocate the different demands required for the task across the different user interface components. As Charles mentioned previously, methodologies such as heuristics, as well as applied cognitive task analysis, are used extensively in other industries, but it's not used so much in the medical device space. And we're really trying to promote its use because it's low cost, very high value, and it's very minimal risk to respondents, as the basic package is often run via remote online interviews, so minimal risk to respondents in the age of COVID-19. Okay, so now I'm going to walk you through an advanced ACTA. In this case study, we examined a blood pressure monitor, or a blood pressure measurement device, as well as the related instructions for use. This was executed in lab to allow us to collect data via a mobile eye tracking system. And the patient, or the subject matter expert in this case, was a patient, as this is the relevant user profile for this device. Okay, so on the left here is our Tobii 2 eye tracking glasses, and we collect data using these glasses and send that into our iMotions data integration platform. Here we have the blood pressure device, as well as the blood pressure measurement cuff, and then the instructions for use here. So this was really an instructions for use optimization study, as well as a device display optimization study here. We use eye tracking in this application to gather more information to gain better insights into root cause of any observed use errors. So eye tracking is really good for that. We gathered objective data beyond users' self-reported strategies using eye tracking data here. So with the eye tracking, as I'll show you on a subsequent slide, we actually get to see what the user is viewing during task performance, and this really gives us a better understanding of the exact elements of the task that are more or less cognitively demanding for the representative user. Okay, so here is just the video streams that are provided by the eye tracking glasses. So in the blue, we just have the participant camera feed, so we can see them performing the task. And then in the red, we have the actual eye tracking glasses video feed. The yellow circle here is the fixation point. So this is exactly what the respondent is looking at in real time. Okay, and this is the output from the eye tracking glasses. So we have the heat map here. It shows the distribution of visual attention across the instructions for use. So red is greater attention, green is less attention, and then no coloring means that the respondent did not attend to that particular area. We also use areas of interest, so we call them AOIs. These provide metrics on defined regions of the IFU. So for example, we gain insight into how long a respondent viewed one section of the IFU compared to another section. So with that, longer view times typically mean that increased cognitive effort was required for understanding and acting on that subtask. So that's very helpful to know. And eye tracking also indicates whether a section was viewed at all. So for example, in this application here, the respondent did not install the battery, which led to a failure to complete their first measurement with the device. And that was really their simulation interview task. So we gained robust insight into the exact root cause of their error using eye tracking in this application. So we gather all of this data with the cognitive task analysis to re-engineer the system components to better manage the cognitive demands for tasks of this kind. Very quickly here, I'm going to walk through microfacial expression analysis. So microfacial quantifies the expression of emotions using the movement of the facial muscles. So the way it works is facial expressions are recorded with a webcam and analyzed using an algorithm that was developed by the Affectiva group of MIT. It tracks the relative distance between landmarks of the face. So you see this is actually my photo here, and we have the landmarks. And in this application, I'm going to show you how multiple data streams are integrated into the eye motion system in real time. So here we are collecting both facial expression, emotional data, as well as galvanic skin response as I view prefilled syringe injections, as well as an auto injector injection. And we're looking to see what kind of emotional response I exhibit in response to those stimuli. So each of the traces, the rows here represent an individual facial expression, and you see them peak as I view the PFS injection. It's a very salient needle injection. So we're seeing all the data. Traces move in real time as I'm viewing the stimuli. And here's the auto injector injection. You don't see the needle as much with the auto injector. So you see in terms of my traces, it's not as peaked of a response during the injection. So less emotional response to the auto injector. So the point of this slide is just to highlight how multiple data streams may be integrated via the eye motion system in real time. Okay, so summarizing ACTA here in terms of cost benefit. So compared to summative studies, the ACTA in the application with the blood pressure device identified all the critical errors that resulted in device use failures, and it did so at 50% of the cost of one formative study. So it's very high value and very effective. Major human factors problems can be identified using ACTA. It's best to do an ACTA early and aggressively to optimize the device design moving into a formative study. And again, in summary, the ACTA provides science-based insights. We can do the advanced option where we're utilizing a small subject sample and integrating iMotion's data streams to provide a more robust and comprehensive view of cognitive demands required of a task. Okay, and now I'm going to pass it to Charles to wrap up with the overall costs.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Just a couple of quick comments about Chris's presentation. I mean, obviously, there's nothing new about eye tracking. It's been around for a long time. Our firm used it 35 years ago. We were, in fact, the first non-military firm to use eye tracking. But its application in highly focused types of small subject sample studies to increase the robustness of the ACTA data is a new way of looking at it. So anyway, let's look at the overall costs here. We all know that human factors studies are expensive. For example, if we have a late stage summative study, they range between $150,000 and $500,000. Very expensive middle stage studies, formative studies, around $100,000 to $200,000. These infrequently utilized but low cost, high value methods are quite cost effective. Heuristics 28 to 75, CTA around 23 to 70. And these other methods, which we haven't covered today, they're also extremely cost effective. So I think what's most important about these methodologies is that they really capitalize on the expertise, sort of dormant expertise, if you will, of human factors experts that oftentimes are applied only to user testing and not to actual development. So pushing their expertise back into the development process is going to produce much better benefit for the development teams and certainly reduce cost in terms of formative and summative studies. Okay, Chris, next slide. Okay, so just to wrap up here, we'd be happy to receive RFPs or requests. If you want copies of our publications, feel very free to let us know. Our next webinar is on June 25th. That's the advanced methods with iMotions. That'll be a very interesting session, truly groundbreaking work there. And please complete our very short survey. We designed it, it takes 90 seconds. Very helpful if you do that. And I want to thank everyone today. We're finishing about a minute and a half late. Apologize for that. And if you have any questions, let me know. I'll let Chris know. Chris will be fielding questions after the session. Do we have any questions, Chris, so far?
We do. We have a few. Would you like me to just read them off, Charles?
Yeah, for anyone who has to jump off, feel free to go ahead. We'll stay on for a few more moments and see if we can answer a couple of the questions that have come up. So go ahead, Chris.
Okay, so one question, and I believe this applies to the heuristics analysis. The question is, how might this vary for looking at a rough prototype versus a design that's much further along in the development process in terms of the level of severity violations?
Great question. The severity violations are not really impacted by state of development. What's impacted by the state of development is the level of detail that you can provide around the underlying human factors problems related to the rule violations. So it doesn't really impact the severity ratings. And as I said in the presentation, clients find that a really robust heuristics analysis provides very detailed description of human factors issues extremely early in development. We've tested products that are paper prototypes, frankly, and it can be quite productive.
Okay, what is the utility of microfacial expression analysis among subject matter experts?
Oh, it's used to support the subject matter experts' data capture in the 3 different types of categories of research that Chris talked about. Microfacial, as long as you understand how to use it properly. I mean, there's a lot of controversy about MFEA. We spent almost 9 months working with our system before we ever used it on a client project to truly understand what it's good at and what it's not good at. But it gives you the emotional connection to the underlying task structure that you cannot get in a self-report. So for example, if you're asking in the simulation interview, you know, how important is it to be able to understand the audio signals that are coming from an OBI? The patient might say, well, yeah, it's sort of important. But then when you read the emotional data, you'll see it's extremely important. So it gives you another layer of expertise and actual analytics on top of the subjective report.
Okay, we have 2 more questions here. How would you go about creating an ACTA for a brand new medical device without any physical prototypes yet?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. I mean, there's a fundamental property of human factors science is the idea of transfer of learning. And transfer of learning is a portion of the ACTA. And as a result, what we would apply is the process of building a mental model of the patient as they interact with this new product. And the mental model would be all of their prior experience. And if they literally had no prior experience with this type of product, then that impacts both the rule violations and the severity ratings. And it's in other industries, for example, ACTA is done before the product is ever designed. It's created as a model for those areas of the user interface that are going to be cognitively demanding and then the software and hardware systems are engineered against those models. Your question is really a good one. This is exactly the problem that we faced with the OBIs early on.
Okay, and final question, and I think this is a good one to wrap up on. Why are heuristics not really used for medical devices?
That's a great question. I came into the human factors medical space about 15 years ago, and even today, I mean, we ran a study about 6 weeks ago, and that product had so many errors in it at the formative stage that could have been uncovered in heuristics. I think it's simply a matter of lack of awareness, and that medical device manufacturers, I think, confuse human factors engineering development with user testing. User testing can be done by a market research firm with suitable background. Human factors science is a development discipline that can be applied in product development. And I think there's sort of a lack of understanding those two things are separate, and generally lack of awareness. But our clients now, especially in light of COVID-19, they have really gotten on the bandwagon with respect to heuristics and ACTA. I think they see the benefit now. Okay, any other questions?
Someone just came in and asked, what is the email to send a request for this presentation? So my email will be in a follow-up email that you'll receive an hour after this presentation. So you'll receive it shortly. And my email address will be in that email. So you could reach out to me with any questions or requests. I'll be happy to answer.
Okay, everyone, thank you very much for your time, and hope you'll sit in on the June 25th. It'll be really interesting. Thank you very much. Have a good morning, afternoon, evening. So long.
Thank you.